The observation deck of the Galactic Council's flagship Dominion hummed with activity as representatives from 12 different species gathered for the monthly colonial assessment. Commander Zephyr Caney stood near the massive viewport, watching the blue-green world of Kepler 442b rotate slowly below. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a woman in her early 30s, auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun, green eyes that had seen too much combat for someone her age. "Another human settlement," sneered Vextar, the Zolonian trade representative, his crystalline features catching the light as he gestured dismissively toward the planet. "How many failed colonies does this make? 17? 18? High Admiral Thane, the Arcturian military commander, clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his insectoid species. "The humans are persistent, I'll give them that, but persistence without capability is merely stubbornness." Zephyr kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd heard variations of this conversation dozens of times before. The other species viewed humanity as the newest, weakest member of the Galactic Council, a charitable inclusion rather than a true partnership. "The settlement reports indicate another resource shortage," continued Dr. Lyriel, the ethereal Luminate science advisor, her translucent form shimmering as she accessed the data streams. "Crop failures, equipment malfunctions, the usual human incompetencies. Perhaps we should consider revoking their colonial rights," suggested Ambassador Gorth, the massive Titan delegate whose species had conquered half the known galaxy before joining the Council. "They're wasting valuable worlds that more capable species could utilize properly." Zephyr finally turned from the viewport. "With respect, the colony on Kepler 442b has only been established for 8 months. Most species require at least 2 years to achieve sustainability on Class M worlds." Vextar's crystalline form pulsed with amusement. "Most species don't claim they can terraform and colonize faster than anyone else. Your kind made rather bold promises to justify your inclusion in the Council. And we've yet to see results," added Admiral Thane. "Your military contributions are negligible, your technology inferior, and your expansion efforts consistently fail. One begins to wonder what humans actually contribute to our alliance." The words stung because they contained uncomfortable truths. Humanity had been admitted to the Galactic Council only 5 years ago, after Earth had been discovered by a Luminate exploration vessel. The first contact had been peaceful. The Council prided itself on civilized expansion rather than conquest, but the terms of membership had been demanding. Humans were granted access to galactic technology, trade networks, and protection under Council law. In exchange, they had to prove their worth through successful colonization efforts, technological innovation, or military contribution. So far, humanity had struggled in all 3 areas. "Our terraforming techniques are still developing," Zephyr replied evenly. "And our military doctrine emphasizes different strengths than traditional Council forces." "Ah, yes, your famous adaptability." Dr. Lyriel's tone carried the distinct condescension that Luminates used when discussing what they considered primitive species. "Though we've seen little evidence of this supposed advantage." Gorth's massive frame shifted, causing the deck to vibrate slightly. "The Signan Rebellion last year proved instructive. Human forces suffered 60% casualties in the first engagement. My people ended the conflict in 3 standard hours." Zephyr remembered that battle well. She'd been there, watching her fellow humans die while the other Council species treated them like expendable scouts. The Signans had been using guerrilla tactics that the traditional Council military couldn't adapt to quickly. Humanity's smaller, more flexible units had been sent in first, ostensibly to gather intelligence, but really because their losses were considered acceptable. "The preliminary scouting provided valuable tactical data," she said. "Expensive data," Admiral Thane clicked. Titans could have simply bombarded the surface and achieved the same result with zero casualties. And destroyed everything worth taking on the planet, Zephyr countered. The mining rights alone have generated— Enough, interrupted Council Speaker Nexus, the ancient AI entity that mediated most official discussions. Its voice resonated through the observation deck's speakers with mechanical precision. This debate serves no productive purpose. The question before us is simple. Should humanity's colonial charter be renewed for another term, or should their membership be adjusted? The euphemism hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone knew what adjusted meant. Humanity would become a protectorate rather than a member, still technically part of the Council, but with no rights or voting power. They'd be reduced to a client species, dependent on the goodwill of their betters. I vote for adjustment, Vextar said immediately. The Zolonian Consortium could make better use of the worlds humans have attempted to colonize. Seconded, clicked Admiral Thane. The Arcturian fleet requires additional training grounds. Dr. Lyriel's form flickered thoughtfully. The Luminate's support continued observation of human development. However, we agree that current colonial assignments should be redistributed to more capable species. Zephyr felt her heart sink. 3 of the 5 major Council species had effectively voted to strip humanity of its colonial rights. Only Ambassador Gorth and the Nexus AI remained uncommitted. The Titans abstain, rumbled Gorth. Your species amuses us, but we have no interest in the territories you've claimed. All eyes turned to the Nexus AI. As the oldest and most powerful member of the Council, its vote carried special weight. More importantly, it required unanimous agreement to change a species' membership status. If Nexus voted against adjustment, humanity would keep its current position, at least for now. Nexus AI calculates that human potential remains unquantified, the mechanical voice finally announced. However, recent performance metrics suggest significant revision of expectations is warranted. Zephyr stepped forward. Speaker Nexus, request permission to present alternative evidence. The observation deck fell silent. Challenging a formal council proceeding was technically legal, but highly irregular. Most species considered it borderline insulting to question decisions made by their betters. State the nature of your evidence, Commander Kane, Nexus replied after a long pause. Give me command of a mission that the Council considers impossible, Zephyr said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. Something your regular forces have failed to accomplish. If humans succeed, we maintain our full membership status. If we fail— She took a deep breath. This was career suicide, but it might be humanity's only chance. If we fail, humanity accepts protectorate status without further appeal. The various delegates exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. Member species didn't typically volunteer for suicide missions to prove their worth. Interesting proposal, mused Dr. Lyriel. Though I'm curious what mission you believe exists that Council forces cannot handle. Admiral Thane's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of aggressive excitement. The Helix Station situation remains unresolved. Even Zephyr felt a chill at those words. Helix Station had been the Council's most advanced research facility, located in the dangerous Maelstrom Nebula on the galaxy's rim. 3 months ago, contact had been lost. 2 separate rescue missions had failed to return. The massive space station, with its crew of over 10,000 beings, had simply vanished into the nebula's chaotic energy storms. The Maelstrom Nebula is considered impassable, Nexus stated. Electromagnetic interference prevents communication or navigation. Gravitational anomalies destroy conventional vessels. The region has been classified as a total loss. But not permanently quarantined, Zephyr pressed. The Council still wants Helix Station back, along with its research data and survivors. Vexatar's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been malicious glee. You propose to succeed where Arcturian battle cruisers and Luminate science vessels have failed? I propose to try. Gorth leaned forward, his massive frame creaking ominously. This becomes entertaining. How many ships would you require, human? 1. Small crew, minimal equipment. The observation deck erupted in what passed for laughter among the various species. The idea of a single human vessel attempting what entire battle groups had failed to accomplish seemed ludicrous. Fascinating, Dr. Lyriel observed. Either humans possess capabilities we have dramatically underestimated, or this is an elaborate form of suicide. Probably the latter, Admiral Thane agreed, but it would resolve the membership question permanently. Zephyr waited for the amusement to die down before speaking again. Do I have authorization? Nexus AI remained silent for nearly a full minute, an eternity in AI processing terms. Finally, the mechanical voice returned. Authorization granted. Mission parameters. Locate and assess Helix Station. Retrieve research data if possible. Evacuate survivors if any remain. Time limit, 60 standard days. Failure to return constitutes mission failure and automatic implementation of protectorate status for humanity. Understood, Zephyr replied. One additional condition, added Vextar, his crystalline features gleaming with anticipation. To ensure proper documentation of this historic event, the mission will carry an observer from each council species. Zephyr's heart sank. A small, agile ship with a hand-picked human crew was one thing. Carrying representatives from 5 different species, each with their own life support requirements and probably their own agendas, would complicate everything. The observers will not interfere with mission operations, she said firmly. Naturally, Dr. Lyriel agreed, though her tone suggested otherwise. We're merely there to witness human ingenuity in action. Admiral Thane's mandibles clicked approvingly. And to ensure accurate reporting when the mission inevitably fails. As the formal meeting dispersed, Zephyr found herself alone at the viewport again, staring down at Kepler 442b. Somewhere on that world, 1,200 human colonists were struggling to build a new life, unaware that their species' future in the galaxy might depend on one desperate mission into an impossible nebula. She thought about the words the council delegates had used. Worthless, expendable, incompetent. For 5 years, humanity had endured those descriptions, accepting them because they seemed accurate. Humans were the newest, weakest, least advanced species in the council. Every failure reinforced that perception. But Zephyr remembered something the other species seemed to have forgotten. Humans didn't survive because they were the strongest or smartest. They survived because when everything else failed, they found a way to adapt. The Maelstrom Nebula had killed every conventional approach to reaching Helix Station. Maybe it was time for an unconventional one. The human vessel, Persistence, looked almost comical next to the massive council ships in the staging area. Where Arcturian battlecruisers bristled with weapons and Luminate science vessels gleamed with advanced sensors, the human ship appeared utilitarian and unremarkable, a converted freight hauler barely 200 meters long. Zephyr stood in the cramped airlock, checking her equipment one final time before the observers arrived. Her crew of 12 had been carefully selected, engineers who could improvise repairs with spare parts, pilots who'd flown everything from atmospheric fighters to deep space haulers, and Marines who specialized in close-quarters combat and boarding actions. Commander, the observers are requesting permission to board, announced Lieutenant Sarah Chen from the bridge. Grant permission. Direct them to the conference room. Zephyr made her way through the ship's narrow corridors, noting with satisfaction how efficiently her crew had converted the cargo holds into specialized compartments. The Persistence might not look impressive, but every system had been optimized for the mission ahead. The conference room barely accommodated the 5 observers. Vextar's crystalline form took up one corner, his faceted body reflecting the overhead lights. Dr. Lyriel hovered near the far wall, her translucent figure shifting between visible and ethereal. Admiral Thane had folded his insectoid frame into a specially modified chair, while Ambassador Gorth's massive bulk required reinforced flooring. The fifth observer was unexpected, a young Zolonian junior attaché named Kira, her crystalline features smaller and less developed than Vextar's. "Welcome aboard the Persistence," Zephyr began. "Before we depart, I need to establish ground rules. This is a human vessel operating under human command protocols. While you're free to observe and document our methods, any interference with operations will result in immediate confinement." Vextar pulsed with amusement. Rather bold for someone commanding what appears to be a converted garbage scow. "This garbage scow has been specifically modified for the conditions we'll face in the Maelstrom," Zephyr replied. "Our hull plating is designed to dissipate electromagnetic interference. Our navigation systems use multiple redundant technologies, and our power core can operate independently of main systems if necessary." Dr. Lyriel's form flickered with interest. "Fascinating. Your modifications suggest you believe the previous missions failed due to technological incompatibility rather than the nebula being genuinely impassable." "I believe they failed because they tried to force their way through using overwhelming power instead of adapting to the environment." Admiral Thane's mandibles clicked skeptically. "The Arcturian Expeditionary Force included 3 heavy cruisers with full escort wings. Are you suggesting your 12-person crew is better equipped than 600 trained warriors?" "I'm suggesting we're differently equipped." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Commander, we're ready for departure," announced Chen. "Take us out, Lieutenant." The Persistence detached from the staging platform and accelerated toward the galactic rim. The journey to the Maelstrom Nebula would take 8 days through hyperspace, time Zephyr planned to use for final preparations and crew training. As they settled into their course, she found herself studying the observers. Vextar spent most of his time documenting everything with his internal recording systems, clearly expecting to witness humanity's final failure. Dr. Lyriel conducted subtle scans of the ship's systems, probably trying to understand the modifications. Admiral Thane reviewed tactical data about the previous failed missions, his warrior instincts analyzing every detail. But it was Kira, the young Zolonian, who proved most interesting. Unlike the others, she asked questions about the crew's backgrounds and seemed genuinely curious about human procedures. "Why do your engineers work in teams instead of specializing individually?" she asked during one of Zephyr's tours of the engine room. "Because complex problems often require multiple perspectives," Zephyr explained. "One person might see a mechanical issue while another notices an electrical component interaction. But this seems inefficient. Surely individual expertise would be more effective." "Sometimes. But when you're dealing with unknown variables, like whatever's happening in the Maelstrom, flexibility is more valuable than efficiency." The young Zolonian's features shifted in a pattern Zephyr was beginning to recognize as deep thought. Unlike the others, Kira didn't seem convinced that humanity was doomed to failure. 3 days into the journey, they encountered their first sign that the Maelstrom Nebula was unlike normal space. The ship's long-range sensors began detecting gravitational anomalies at the nebula's edge, distortions that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. "Energy readings are off the charts," reported Engineer Martinez from his station. "Whatever's generating those distortions is more powerful than a planetary core." Dr. Lyriel materialized on the bridge, her ethereal form shimmering with excitement. "Remarkable. The quantum signatures suggest dimensional instabilities. No wonder conventional navigation fails. Space itself is unreliable in that region." Vextar's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been satisfaction. "This confirms the futility of the mission. No vessel can navigate through destabilized space-time." No vessel using conventional navigation, Zephyr corrected. Lieutenant Chen, begin the modifications we discussed. For the next 2 days, the crew worked around the clock to implement what they called the Chaos Protocol. Instead of fighting the nebula's distortions, they would use them. The ship's navigation computer was programmed with probability algorithms that could calculate likely outcomes in unstable space. The hull was equipped with sensors that could detect quantum fluctuations and adjust the ship's trajectory accordingly. You're attempting to ride the distortions like ocean currents, Dr. Lyriel observed. Theoretically possible, but requiring precise timing and extraordinary luck. Humans have always been good at making their own luck, Zephyr replied. On the 8th day, they reached the maelstrom's boundary. The nebula stretched across their view screen like a cosmic storm. Swirling clouds of gas and energy shot through with lightning-like discharges. According to the nav computer, Helix Station was somewhere in the center, approximately 47 light hours away. Final systems check, Zephyr announced. All stations report readiness. One by one, her crew confirmed their preparations. The observers gathered on the bridge, their various recording devices activated to document humanity's attempt at the impossible. Take us in, Lieutenant. The Persistence crossed the nebula's boundary, and immediately everything changed. The ship's hull rang like a bell as exotic energy washed over them. The main lights flickered as electromagnetic interference played havoc with their systems. On the view screen, normal space twisted and distorted like a funhouse mirror. Navigation sensors are useless, reported Chen. Switching to Chaos Protocol. The ship lurched suddenly as they hit the first major distortion. Ambassador Gorth's massive frame shifted, his chair creaking ominously. Even Vextar's usually steady crystalline form flickered with uncertainty. Hull stress within acceptable parameters, Martinez called out. Power core stable. Quantum sensors reading fluctuations at 12,000% normal. For the first hour, they made steady progress. The Chaos Protocol worked better than expected, using the nebula's own instabilities to propel them forward. But as they penetrated deeper into the maelstrom, the distortions intensified. Contact ahead, announced sensor specialist Rodriguez. Debris field, approximately 3,000 meters. On the view screen, twisted metal fragments tumbled through the energy storm. Some pieces were recognizable as hull plating from Council vessels. Others had been so distorted by the nebula's effects that they looked like abstract art. Arcturian design, Admiral Thane confirmed grimly. Remains of the second expedition. The mood on the bridge grew somber as they navigated through the graveyard of the previous mission. These had been experienced warriors flying advanced warships, and the nebula had destroyed them completely. Something's wrong with the quantum readings, Dr. Lyriel announced, her ethereal form flickering more rapidly than usual. The dimensional instabilities are increasing exponentially. At this rate, space-time itself will become completely unreliable within 6 hours. Can we reach Helix Station before then? Zephyr asked. Chen studied her instruments. Maybe, but even if we find it, we might not be able to get back out. One crisis at a time, Zephyr decided. Continue course. They pushed deeper into the maelstrom, riding waves of distorted space-time like ancient sailors navigating by the stars. The ship groaned and creaked around them, but the modifications held. More importantly, the Chaos Protocol continued to work, using the nebula's own energy to maintain their forward momentum. After 4 more hours of nerve-wracking navigation, Rodriguez suddenly straightened at her station. I'm reading something big ahead, metallic structure approximately 50 kilometers. Put it on screen. Helix Station materialized out of the energy storm like a ghost ship. The massive research facility was still intact, but it wasn't where it should be. Instead of maintaining its original position, the station drifted freely through the nebula, caught in the same distortions that had trapped them. It's moving, Chen observed. The whole station is being carried by the dimensional currents. Life signs? Zephyr asked. Rodriguez worked her instruments frantically. Hard to tell through all this interference, but I'm detecting power signatures. Someone might still be alive in there. Vextar's crystalline form pulsed with surprise. Impossible. No one could survive 3 months in this environment. Unless they adapted, Kira said quietly. The young Zalonian had been silent for most of the journey, but now she leaned forward with obvious interest. Humans are supposed to be good at adaptation, aren't they? Dr. Lyriel's form shimmered with new calculations. The station's drift pattern suggests it's been caught in a stable current. If the crew managed to modify their systems to work with the nebula instead of against it, they could have survived, Zephyr finished. Lieutenant Chen, can you match our course to theirs? It'll be tricky, but possible. We'll have to ride the same current they're caught in. For the next 2 hours, they played a delicate game of cosmic billiards, using gravitational distortions to adjust their trajectory until they matched Helix Station's course. The process required split-second timing and absolute trust in the Chaos Protocol's calculations. Finally, they achieved synchronization. The Persistence drifted alongside the massive station like 2 ships becalmed in an otherworldly ocean. Attempting communication, reported Communications Officer Park. Broadcasting on all frequencies. Static filled the bridge speakers, shot through with the nebula's electromagnetic interference. Then, faintly, a human voice emerged from the chaos. Unknown vessel, this is Helix Station. Please identify yourself. We've been waiting for rescue. The voice was weak, exhausted, but unmistakably alive. Zephyr felt a surge of triumph mixed with relief. Helix Station, this is Commander Zephyr Kane aboard the Council vessel. Persistence, we're here to bring you home. A long pause followed, filled only with static. When the voice returned, it carried a note of disbelief. Commander, this is Dr. James Harrison, Acting Commander of Helix Station. Ma'am, we have 11,000 survivors aboard this station, including representatives from 7 different species. But I need you to know, we can't leave. The triumph in Zephyr's chest turned to cold dread. Explain, Doctor. We've been studying the nebula for 3 months. The dimensional instabilities aren't natural. They're artificial. Someone or something is using the maelstrom as camouflage for the largest military buildup we've ever encountered. And, Commander, they know we're here. The docking bay of Helix Station was a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the massive chamber as the Persistence settled into its berth. Through the viewports, Zephyr could see the station's crew working frantically to complete some kind of massive construction project. Dr. James Harrison met them at the airlock, a tall, gaunt man whose clothes hung loosely on his frame. 3 months of survival rations had taken their toll, but his eyes still burned with scientific intensity. Commander Caney, thank God you made it through, he said, clasping her hand firmly. Though I'm afraid your timing could be better. Behind Zephyr, the council observers filed into the station with obvious amazement. Vexitar's crystalline form pulsed rapidly as he recorded everything, while Dr. Lyriel's ethereal presence flickered with excitement at the unprecedented situation. What's your status, Doctor? Zephyr asked. 11,237 souls still alive. We've been surviving on minimal power and recycled everything, but that's not our biggest problem. Harrison gestured toward the construction activity visible through the viewports. 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected something emerging from the deepest part of the nebula. Something big. He led them through corridors lined with improvised living spaces where station personnel had created temporary shelters. Zephyr noted the mix of species working together. Humans alongside Luminates, Zalonians, even a few Arcturians. Whatever they'd faced here had united them in ways the Council had never achieved. The nebula isn't natural, Harrison continued. Someone has been artificially generating the dimensional distortions for at least 50 years. We think it's a species that's been using the maelstrom as a hidden base to build a fleet large enough to challenge the entire galaxy. They reached the station's main observation deck, and Zephyr felt her blood turn to ice. Through the swirling energy storms, massive shapes moved in the distance, geometric forms easily 10 times the size of the largest Council battleship. Even at this distance, she could count dozens of them. "My God," breathed Dr. Lyriel, "the power required to construct vessels of that size is exactly what you'd need to generate artificial dimensional distortions on this scale," Harrison finished. "We think they're called the Harbingers. Our best guess is they're an ancient civilization that's been preparing for galactic conquest while hiding in the maelstrom." Admiral Thane's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Why haven't they attacked the Council directly?" "Because they've been waiting for something," Harrison said grimly. 3 days ago, our sensors detected a massive energy buildup at the nebula's core. We think they're preparing to launch their invasion fleet. When they do, they'll have the element of total surprise. Ambassador Gorth's massive frame shifted ominously. "How long do we have?" "Based on the energy patterns, maybe 72 hours before they're ready to move." Zephyr studied the alien vessels through the observation windows. Even with the nebula's distortions, she could see they were unlike anything in Council databases. Their design suggested technology far beyond what any known civilization possessed. "What about evacuation?" she asked. "Can we get the station personnel out?" Harrison shook his head. "The Harbingers have been tracking us since we discovered their fleet. Any attempt to leave the station would trigger an immediate attack. Our only chance is to find a way to warn the Council before the invasion begins." "The dimensional distortions prevent long-range communication," Dr. Lyriel observed. "No signal could penetrate the interference." "Which is why we've been building this," Harrison said, leading them to another viewport. Outside, Zephyr could see the massive construction project more clearly. It was a probe of some kind, a sleek, torpedo-shaped vessel bristling with sensors and communication equipment. "We call it the Herald," Harrison explained. "It's designed to ride the dimensional currents out of the nebula and deliver a warning to the Council, but there's a problem." Of course there was. Zephyr waited for the other shoe to drop. "The probe needs to be manually piloted through the worst part of the distortions. Our navigation computers can't handle the complexity. It requires human intuition and adaptability. But the process will expose the pilot to lethal levels of dimensional radiation. It's a suicide mission." The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Zephyr stared at the Herald, understanding the impossible choice they faced. Someone had to die to save the galaxy. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "Commander, no," protested Lieutenant Chen over the comm system. "We can find another way." But Zephyr knew there wasn't another way. This was exactly the kind of situation where human adaptability mattered most, where someone had to make the ultimate sacrifice, because it was the only option that might work. "Actually," interrupted Kira, the young Zalonian observer, "there might be an alternative." Everyone turned to look at her. She'd been quiet throughout the briefing, but now her crystalline features pulsed with nervous determination. "Zalonians can survive higher levels of dimensional radiation than other species," she continued. "Our crystalline matrix provides natural shielding, but I've never piloted anything more complex than a transport shuttle." "The Herald isn't that different from a shuttle," Harrison said thoughtfully. "Simplified controls, mostly automated systems. It's the navigation that requires intuitive thinking." Zephyr felt a spark of hope. "Could you teach her our navigation techniques?" "In 72 hours? Maybe." For the next 3 days, Helix Station became a training ground unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Zephyr and her crew worked with Kira to teach her human navigation methods, how to feel the flow of space-time, how to use instinct instead of instruments, how to adapt when everything went wrong. The other observers watched with growing amazement as the young Zolonian absorbed techniques that most council species considered impossible to learn. Fascinating, Dr. Lyriel commented during one training session. She's integrating human intuitive methods with Zolonian analytical precision. I didn't think such synthesis was possible. Humans have always been good teachers, Zephyr replied. We had to be. It's how we survived. Meanwhile, the Harbinger fleet continued its preparations. Long-range sensors showed more vessels emerging from the nebula's depths, an armada of impossible size preparing to sweep across the galaxy like a tide of destruction. On the final day, as the Herald systems came online, Harrison pulled Zephyr aside. Commander, I need you to know something. When we first detected your ship, most of the station's command staff thought you were insane for attempting this rescue. Even after you proved you could navigate the maelstrom, they figured you'd take one look at the situation and run. But you didn't? I've worked with humans before. I know what you're capable of when everything seems impossible. He paused, watching through the viewport as Kira ran final checks on the Herald. That young Zolonian reminds me of the best human pilots I've known. Maybe there's hope for the galaxy after all. The launch came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected massive energy spikes throughout the Harbinger fleet. The invasion was beginning ahead of schedule. Kira sealed herself into the Herald's cockpit, her crystalline features calm despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Through the communication system, her voice carried the same quiet determination Zephyr had heard from the best human pilots. Herald ready for launch, dimensional shielding at maximum, navigation computers synchronized with chaos protocol. Remember, Zephyr said over the comm, trust your instincts. The instruments will lie to you, but your gut feeling won't. Understood. Thank you for teaching me to think like a human. The Herald launched into the swirling chaos of the maelstrom, disappearing almost immediately into the energy storms. For agonizing minutes, they tracked its progress through the nebula's outer layers, watching as Kira navigated by pure instinct through distortions that would have destroyed any conventional vessel. Then the signal vanished as the Herald entered the nebula's most dangerous region. 12 hours later, emergency klaxons began sounding throughout Council space. The message was simple but terrifying. Massive unknown fleet approaching from Galactic Rim, all vessels to battle stations. This was not a drill, but the Council was ready. Warned by Kira's sacrifice, the combined fleets of 12 species waited in formation as the Harbinger Armada emerged from the maelstrom. What should have been a surprise attack became the largest space battle in galactic history. The fighting lasted 3 days. The Harbingers were powerful, but they'd planned for an unprepared enemy. Instead, they faced a united council that fought with desperate courage. Human vessels, dismissed as worthless for so long, proved their worth by adapting to Harbinger tactics faster than any other species. Their unconventional approaches saved entire battle groups. In the end, the Harbinger fleet was defeated, not destroyed, but driven back into the nebula with such heavy losses that they wouldn't threaten the galaxy again for centuries. When the Persistence finally returned to Council space 3 weeks later, they found the political landscape completely changed. The emergency had forced the various species to work together in ways they'd never imagined possible. The Council owes humanity a considerable debt, Speaker Nexus announced in the formal debriefing. Your species has demonstrated capabilities we failed to recognize. Vextar's crystalline form had lost its earlier arrogance. The Zolonian Consortium formally requests expanded cooperation with human colonial efforts. We have much to learn from your adaptive methods. Even Admiral Thane seemed subdued. Arcturian military doctrine will be revised to incorporate human tactical flexibility. Your contributions were significant, but it was Dr. Lyriel who surprised Zephyr most. The Luminates propose joint research initiatives with human scientists. Your approach to impossible problems could revolutionize our understanding of the universe. Later, as Zephyr stood once again at the observation deck of the Council flagship, she thought about the words that had started this entire mission. Worthless, expendable, nothing to contribute. Those words seemed hollow now. Humanity had proven their worth not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but by doing what they'd always done best, adapting, improvising, finding a way when no way seemed to exist. A soft chime announced an incoming message. On the communication screen, a familiar crystalline face appeared. Kira, somehow alive and well at a council medical facility. "Commander Caney," the young Zolonian said, "I wanted to thank you. When I volunteered to pilot the Herald, I thought I was going to die. But your navigation techniques worked perfectly. The dimensional radiation was manageable, and I made it through the worst distortions without any permanent damage." Zephyr felt a warmth spread through her chest. "You saved the galaxy, Kira. How does it feel?" "Like I finally understand what humans mean by making your own luck," Kira replied. "I was wondering, would you consider taking on more students? I think other species could benefit from learning human methods." "I'd be honored." As the communication ended, Zephyr looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as the strongest or smartest species, but as teachers and innovators, showing others that there was always another way to solve an impossible problem. They called her worthless, nothing but expendable. But in the end, she'd found exactly where she belonged.